Hello and welcome back to Outhouse Studio Devlogs. This time, we're going to make another progress update since the last time we checked in. The last time we went over the characters that would be available to the player in our MVP, as well as the skills each character has. So this time, we're going to talk about decisions we made about how battle would work in our game, as well as how we went about making a system to get the player skills into the context of our game. Something we had to talk about in our team and come to like a hard decision to was whether or not positioning would have an effect on combat. So for instance, our characters fighting in a sort of face-to-face one-on-one configuration, our characters in slots on a board, does position matter? In the end, we wound up going with a system where character positioning matters very much. So in other words, characters who specialized in close-range combat should be at the slot closest to the enemy party, and that slot would also correspond to the slot typically most in range of the enemy attacks. It became clear that we'd want to keep our weaker ranged battle characters further back from the enemy party, and our tankier characters, meant for defending or soaking damage, should be closer to the enemy party, right? So with respect to this decision that we made, the impact of that decision on what would later become the implementation of the skills was that it meant that skills had to be very specific with respect to what their target was. We had to go beyond simpler terms like just melee and ranged. We had to have a specific target type, and it had to be very specific. So with respect to figuring out from there how data related to skills or data in general would be translated to the game, so we spent a lot of time considering what exactly our data structure would look like. We knew we had a bunch of sort of loosey-goosey data types that we had to make work together, so we settled on using JSON files to define our skill data, as well as other data such as character stats. So we needed a way to define skills in an extensible way such that we could express complex properties related to skills, such as properties that modify the potency of a skill, or skills that depend on some other factor being true for the skill to activate. So this was easily the hardest part of making all the skill stuff work, and if ever there's somebody listening to this who's trying to make something similar, my advice to you would just be to take it slow, start at the beginning, and don't ever be married to your ideas, because when you're in the process of defining complex relationship between data types that you're in the process of defining, it can be very confusing, and the best thing you can do for yourself is to make diagrams, try to be as visual as you can, and also keep in mind that the point at which you're going to be implementing the skills, at that point you need to know what information you need to have for everything to work properly. So as long as you keep that stuff in mind, it'll make your life a lot easier. So as we were going through this, we went through many iterations before we found a system we wanted. Often we would think we found an okay system, but then we would go to implement it. We find it either impossible to read, or maybe there's a better way to do it, or just that there were some shortcomings in the system we were using. So we would make the changes, and we worked on this for a solid week or two, and finally we have something we're pretty happy with. Also, side note, but something we didn't mention last week, was that another thing we implemented after figuring out which characters we would have in our game was the stats that each of those characters would have. So we allocated health, critical chance, and other properties to each character, and implemented a save and load feature. So that's already working, and there you go. Next on the roadmap for us is going to be the implementation of a party selection system. So it's just going to be an empty scene sort of in which the user is able to select their party members. We save that configuration, and then we're able to load it. So the plan is to allow for the player to select their party, and once that's working, we turn our attention to the battle mechanism and flow of combat and all that good stuff. So these latter items obviously are more complex and might take some time, so we'll check in with some other stuff until this is ready. On behalf of Outhouse Studios, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more, and we'll catch you next time.